G'day and welcome to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. Today we are recapping all of the action across the Community Series preseason games. So much to talk about. I've changed my team a million times. Let's go!
Hodge has done it from nowhere. Lifting the goal from inside the field. Sheed from the boundary. Dusty.
G'day and welcome again to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. I am your host, Mitch Casey, and you can find me on Twitter at Ball Boys Fantasy. Joined as always, the man who missed out on the Content Creators All-Star team, Luke Rogerson. How are you, mate?
I'm good, but I feel as though we've been left with more questions than answers after watching these.
Feels that way. It feels that way. There's a few players who had been sitting in my team for 99% of the preseason that now, either stunk it up or rolled their ankles and things like that. So there's question marks for the first time on then. Some players who I wanted decisive decisions all put their hands up. So it's sort of like, okay, no one really separated themselves from something. So yeah, I mean, we'll try and give our takes on some of these things.
Yeah. It's hot off the press too. We only just finished watching the last game.
Like I said, just finished that North and St Kilda game to get this out to you guys. So let's just go into it. I think we will say in this one, we are going to be doing a rookies podcast next podcast in a couple of days' time. So in the interest of trying to keep this one semi-brief, we're going to be excluding the rookies and the cash cows. So players under 300Ks, we're probably not going to talk about too much in this podcast, focusing on the, premiums and mid-prices with our separate podcast focusing on those rookies, because there are a few rookies that we do need to obviously pencil in there, and a lot of round zero will dictate that as well. Let's start with the first game.
Let's take our minds all the way back to Tuesday and talk Richmond-Collingwood, mate.
Richmond and Collingwood.
Anything in particular jump out at you?
Well, the first thing, this will be the cheapest player we talk about today because he just crossed over that 300k mark, but Finn McRae, I don't think he's going to be there. I also don't think if he is there, he's locked into that best 22, and he's definitely a big sub-risk. So for me, with a few other guys putting their hand up, I think he's someone that unless he comes out and just dominates opening round and his score's going to be right up there, I think he's someone I've pretty much put a pencil line through him at the moment.
Yeah, he's just a victim of the team that he's playing at, isn't he?
Yeah, hard to break into that premiership side. Dacos was Dacos, played 57% game time and scored like an 85, so
he's snuck into Oxlong training.
I know he has, yeah.
Despite my best efforts to keep him out. It's normally a no Dacos zone this preseason, but he's just lurking.
This just in, Nick Dacos is a good footy player. So breaking news. So did we learn much? I don't think so. Were we reminded that he's just a fucking gun? Yes, maybe. It's been a little while since we've watched footy, obviously.
Surely Finn doesn't start the year in that Hawthorn team.
Yeah, but he could just come back in for that one game.
So good too.
That one game. They won the game that they versed them last time when he was tagging him.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it is. It raises the question. Obviously, if you were trying to go against him and you saw him play, it's reality now. It's like, yep, this is what I'm going to be missing out on for at least these first 6 rounds or so. Yeah, but I don't think we learned anything new with Dacos. He was basically full-time midfielder. So maybe that's something we can learn. I think the other thing from the Richmond point of view, Liam Baker, he was touted to play a bit more midfield time. 2 centre bounces for the entire game. Played mostly forward. Yeah,
it really hurts his stocks, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't think you can go there. But a guy who did soak up a lot of midfield time was Thompson Dow. He tied the most with 11 CBAs in this game. Found a lot of it, but again, a bit more of that like Nat Fyfe mold in terms of he's like that inside Jacob Hopper sort of type where handball happy, didn't have the greatest of scores. So whilst the inside mid role I think is real, I think he'll be in there with Taranto, Hopper, Prestia, Dusty, like those 5 are sort of your main group.
Yeah, he's mid-only and at an awkward price in that midfield.
What is he at? 400k, yeah.
So he's similar to Hustwaite, who we've been talking about. He's getting a little bit of midfield time at Hawthorn as well, but in that awkward price bracket.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely is value, but I personally don't think he's enough value to use a midfield spot on him. So, Yeah, not too much to talk about with both of these teams. Obviously, two teams with the early round buys. So I don't think that anyone really screamed pick me in these. What
do you think of Shorty?
Game. I mean, Jaden Short was solid. He had 92. I did note that his kick-ins weren't... like, he had 9, the most, but Rioli still had 4. Broad had 1. Gipkus had 1. Camden McIntosh had 1. I think he'll be good. I think he'll be a little bit of value, but for me, it's still not enough.
There's also quite a few guys around that kind of between 800 to like Sheasel then at 870k right in around there that we kind of like the look of. I think maybe a little bit more than Shorty.
Yeah.
But there's always the opportunity in that price bracket to then pivot across if you find that you're on the wrong one and he starts popping. But early buy as well. So.
Yeah, no, so for me, not too much to see and gather from this game here, just ruling a couple of players out in McRae and Baker, who, if you had on your sort of list before, I'm not liking what I'm seeing too much. Let's go to Melbourne and Carlton, where there are a few talking points here. The first talking point is the fact that Zach Williams didn't play in this game. So he didn't play a single preseason game that we could watch, but he did play in the VFL Pracky match, which I think was before this one. So all reports are that he came out of that one unscathed. I don't really know what this means. Is it meaning that he's going to be there for us in the opening round and we'll get a look at him?
Given that he hasn't played a preseason game, if he is there in opening round, what's your line? The line? And the roll?
The line and the roll, man. He's got the round 2. It's moved up.
Yeah.
I think before I would have accepted like a 70 to 75. I think it's probably gone up another 10 to 15 points. I'd want to see like 85, I think.
We're a little
he's still
unsure.
Priced so cheap though. Like he's priced at like 40, I think. So.
And given we're a little unsure in the back line as well,
it would depend on what you could do with that mix around as well.
It's really tough in there because if you're not going him at say D5, are you going all the way to Yo at D5?
Yeah.
A guy that could be there round 1 is Windhager potentially.
You haven't seen him, the broken hand.
So that would be a tough one.
Call. Kadeen Coleman's got the same round 2 buy. He's more expensive.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. There's a lot of things moving around, and he's going to be a big kind of like turning point for a lot of teams on whether or not you. I mean, I'm almost hoping. This is a sicko in me, but I'm hoping he's not there round 0, and then I just can't pick him. I just won't pick him if he's not there round 0. This is just out of my hands. I'm not going to pick a guy who hasn't played round 0, even if he's named round 1. I won't pick him. If he's there and he scores like a 75, like it'll be a tough decision just off the back of lack of those preseason games. But yeah, interesting one. No Sam Walsh as well. Apparently, I saw a report today that he has been doing laps and not training with the main group. So. The wording is that it would be a surprise if he is there in opening round. So, again, I've said it before, but I think you just can't pick him off the back of no sort of preseason games, and he's not cheap like a Zach Williams to take that risk.
Something interesting here, we're talking about defender options and where we're going here. Christian Salem.
Yes.
So...
This is a legit option.
Well, this is the weird thing. Hey, we noted that in the match sim, he didn't come on until later, but he played that exclusive midfield role, and we thought, well, it would be weird to put him in there if the intention wasn't to be. And then we saw that apparently he's a tackling beast.
He's a tackling beast. 9 tackles in a practice game, which seems very high.
So this is something where if we didn't have the what's Clary doing hanging over our head, this seems like a very good pick in my opinion. A guy that you can pick as a backman that would be underpriced for a guy that you think could go mid-90s in the midfield.
Oh, yeah, it would seem that way. He's done mid-90s before on a half-back role.
So is it exclusively the Clary thing that makes this sketchy?
The Clary thing adds an element of where we're not sure. I think the wording is at the moment that he more than likely will be there round 0. I think he's ticking all the boxes. And I believe that to be the case. However, he was the number 1 CBA attendee in this preseason game. He was ahead of Viney. He was ahead of Petrarca. And then there was a pretty decent gap down from those 3 down to Tom Sparrow, who was next. So I believe, and again, it will be a watch in round 0, but I believe that they have made this move and they talked about wanting a bit more sort of better entry inside forward 50, Oliver and those sort of types kind of just hack it in there. Whereas, Sailor might be a bit more of a cleaner user, get him up the ground a bit.
Something that's interesting statistically as well, I've just pulled up Melbourne's CBAs from last year. Obviously, Oliver, when he was there, was the leading averaging CBA guy. Then you go Viney, Petrarca. You go to Sparrow then. And then in the latter half of the year, Brayshaw actually...
He jumps back in.
He did.
Yeah.
He went up at around 60% CBAs from what I can see here.
So I could easily see that being Salem's role.
James Jordan had a little bit as well. So
and he's gone.
Exactly. So
Harms
if it's
would have
just
been in there too, surely.
Harms was the next guy down, but had very few. But yeah, if they've just gone, okay, well, we've lost 3 guys that had CBAs in the back half of the year, we insert Salem in there, even if he's a 60% CBA guy. You know,
yeah, and he's got the early buy round, but it's around 6.
Yes.
So could you go him up to round 6, trade him across to Dacos? You know, bada bim, bada boom, you're out. You're good to go.
It could be.
I don't mind the option. He's one of the main players that I'm going to be watching in these early round 0 games.
Yeah, for sure.
To see what he scores like and to see if someone like an Oliver is back in there.
Yeah.
Does his role hold up? I, at this stage, think it will. I think he'll be sort of that 4th midfield guy behind Viney, Petrarca, and Oliver. And I do believe that could be a decent enough role for him. 700k, so I think he's priced at, what's that, about 77. So yeah, if he goes mid-90s, low 90s even, that's a pretty solid pick, in my opinion, because especially he's going to have that accelerated cash generation early on. Someone who dominated, Max Gawn, just absolutely came out and reminded everybody why he is, just basically one of the best rucks in the game. He 130. He only had 2 tackles, and he scored 130, kicked 2 goals, racked up 24 touches. Just smashed it.
Surely with everything that happened ruck-wise this weekend, Gawn's come into a lot of teams.
His ownership has spiked, I think.
Yeah.
And look, I had him as an ace on the deck of DT for a reason, and this is exactly what I...
Yeah.
I didn't expect a 130 in the preseason game, but we know he's capable of this. So, yes, I think it wouldn't surprise me if he is the number 1 owned ruckman by the end of round 0.
It's
I know
funny what a week
up
can
there,
do,
but
yeah. Yeah, it's definitely funny what a week can do.
Absolutely. And then Jack Billings. Talking about Jack Billings. He's an option for us in the forward line. Now, he scored all right. Scored an 81. Had 1 goal in there. Got off the ground a lot. 5 marks, 4 tackles. So, diversified stat line.
Yeah, this afternoon I was having a close look at Tom Powell from North Melbourne in a really similar price bracket there. And after Simpkin got concussed, the Tom Powell CPA's just dried up. So I don't know whether that was related to the Simpkin concussion or what it was. But Billings is a guy that has sort of come into calculations as well. The early buy is a little bit unfortunate. But historically, he's been a guy that even, not in a juicy CBA role has been able to give you 80s and priced at something that is not 80. I think he can be value.
Or something. Yeah, so that's, down the 60 mark, I think. So, look, he played a bit of wing and half forward. So I think the previous game he was more exclusively in that half forward role. But I think he moved a bit up into the wing on this game, which I don't know, is that a good or a bad thing? I think wings we always sort of don't like to see that, but I think he can make that role really well. That's been something he's done at the Saints before and scored high 80s, 90s in the wing role before. So still someone to watch in the round 0 games. I think there's a few other forwards later that impressed me more, that just put their hands up a bit stronger for me. But again, if he comes out and dominates an early round 0 game, you might be able to just ride that cash generation and sort of get away with it. And again, round 6, ride it to his buy and then easily just trade him out. It's not too much of an issue to you don't have to hold him through that buy round, so it's not that much of a deterrent for me if that cash generation is there early.
If he gave you that 81 in round 0, do you think he'd go there?
81 might not. I don't think that would do it. I think if he went maybe 90, 95, had a pop game, that might make me turn my head. I don't think 81 is quite enough. I think that's just maybe under 20 points above his price stat figure.
Yeah.
So it's good, but it's not enough for me to bypass the options that I feel like were a bit more eye-catching, personally.
Yeah. Beautiful.
All right, let's talk about Sydney and Brisbane. The first thing to note here is that Taylor Adams did get injured in this game, and it's reported that he's going to miss the first 4 rounds, effectively the first 5 rounds. Although I don't know when they've reported that if they've taken into account round 0 when they say first 4.
Well, regardless of what he's missing, the guy who
he's not gonna be
stocks up,
picked. Yeah.
well, 2 guys perhaps. Errol, for anyone who was even considering Errol, even with the early bye, he's an absolute gun. But James Jordan is a guy that we were talking about early preseason. We kind of stopped talking about him a little bit, just unsure about how deep that Sydney midfield would go.
Well, it was confusing in that first game, and it's still confusing now, but there's enough bodies out with obviously the Parker injury and now Taylor Adams that you don't have to question it, at least for those first few rounds anyway. And you can sort of just figure the rest out later with a player like James Jordan. So
the fact that he went above 110, 119 and is priced at 50, he's obviously a guy that can find the pill.
Yeah, racked it up. I think he had the highest disposals in the entire game. He had 31. McCluggage had 31. The next best was Errol Goulden with 24. So clearly found the ball a lot.
He saw a little bit of CBA time. I didn't have eyes on this one. I was just looking at the stats, but you watched a little more closely. There was a little bit of CBA time in there, but majority wing role?
Majority wing role, I think roughly about 30%, I think, in there. But Taylor Adams did play about a half of the footy, so maybe that does still see room to rise up a little bit. So I think all signs it's a positive for James Jordan, and unless he comes out and lays an absolute turd in round 0, he's firming to be a pretty strong pick in that forward line.
Can I quickly circle back to Errol? I know there's the early buy there, but does he come into calculations at all with guys like Laird and Brayshaw having
question marks on a few other guys?
So we're obviously going to talk about both of those guys later on as well. But when there starts to be question marks, those kind of premium midfielders, we've seen you running out of options that don't have flags on them.
It kind of sucks because all the ones that don't have the early buys, maybe besides Bont, who is priced at like 118, there are just those little, like they're not, huge things, but just little things that maybe you don't want to question, except for these young guys in Tom Green and Errol Goulden who have those early buy rounds, and they just look to be picking up where they left off. And so if you did want to go there, I personally am not doing it. I'm going to try and stick to my rules, but there's a world where it works. There's a world where he just goes so big, so strong. He's going to be a captain option. You give up one round and maybe you can get a decent score and loop it on. You can play with a few rookies that might go off. And there's a world where it's a great pick. I'm not going to definitely say that you can't do it. I'm just going to say personally I'm not going to do it.
It makes sense. I mean, going against him worked really well for you last year, so that's probably good by you.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Rub that in, mate. Fond memories. Let's talk about another guy that I might be going against. Who didn't score very well and helped my case here.
Yeah.
Grundy, poor score. What do you have? 51 in this game. But I will, as someone who's down on Grundy compared to maybe the consensus, I will say he didn't play a huge amount of time on ground. He had about 60% TOG in this game. So you see the 51. It's alarm stations. Now, how much should people be panicking with this? Is it, obviously a lot of people might be reactionary and go, Grundy to Gawn if they didn't have that option.
Yeah.
But then we'll talk about the other ruck player later in this line in Cherry, who also maybe didn't, maybe underwhelmed a little bit as well. So what are your thoughts on Grundy? Does this change your mind about him? Does this sort of like cement where you were already thinking? What do you reckon?
It probably confirms a little bit more of what I was already thinking. But for people who were high on Grundy, I think it's only alarm stations depending on what you expected from him. Like if you were pie in the sky stuff like he's back to his 120s, then I would probably be a little alarmed at this score. But if you were expecting, high 80s, low 90s from him, then I'd say, okay, well, 50 on low time on ground.
Yeah.
Also, against the Lions, the Big O, I think, is notoriously good at stopping some rucks. So.
He has been, but I know looking at some of the stats and things like that for rucks more recently, the back half of last year, the Big O did slow down considerably. Okay. Gave up a few big scores at the end of the season. So I don't know how much weight that narrative necessarily holds true, but definitely in Grundy's matchups against him, he has held him to some poor scores in the past. But in saying that, he still had the clear role. He was the highest CBA attendee out of Sydney's team, even on those 60% time on ground. So he's got the number one ruck role. That hasn't changed.
Yeah.
He was just managed in terms of his minutes out there. And obviously he's going to have to go up against Max Gawn. And, I think when this game went on about a week's time, so not much of a turnaround, so fair enough that they sort of rested him. You're going to get another look at these guys. And this is interesting. I sort of thought, like, we'll talk about another player in a second, like who didn't perform well in a Sam Flanders. Imagine this was the last game for these guys, and you had to make a decision after that, and we didn't get another look. But thankfully, with this round 0, you do get that extra look, even though it does suck that they miss a round. At least you get a bit more data.
Kitty Coleman is a guy that you've been a no on all preseason, and then you come to me on Wednesday, Thursday night. You go, big Kitty Coleman guy. Rog, just love him. Get him in your team. What's changed, man?
Well, this is more a reaction to the Zach Williams scenario, because when you go a Zach Williams out and you're trying to find other value options, there's not too many options that I go, I love it. And
the way you were talking about him, mate, you'd think he was Kadeem Brownlow, not Kadeem Coleman.
Not pop up that much, but he looked good, and he started the game really well. I think you've got a stat to throw out in terms of his quarterly scoring breakdown, but no kick-ins was the other thing in this one here, which I found interesting. He still scored all right with a 91, and at his price tag, that would be excellent. 74% time on ground. You'd expect that to be a little bit higher as well. So I think it's a solid performance. It still will come down to the round 0 score, but because Zach Williams, there's doubts there, I think having Kadeen there it makes more sense for me now than it did before, because you can still have that one guy who's got that early buy round, because there are a few other value options that have fallen over. I do think he's underpriced. It'll just depend on that early buy round to see if you can maybe wait a week and not have to jump on in your starting squad, and just how the structure of your team maybe shapes up. But yeah, he's still someone that I'm considering. Well, he is someone I'm considering now, maybe more seriously than before.
I'm still not quite 100% sold, and what you referenced before was just the breakdown of his stats across the quarters there. So he started red hot with 41 in the first quarter, and then he gave 16 in the second quarter, 23 in the third, and then 11 in the fourth. Again, I didn't have eyes on that game, so maybe the 11 in the fourth, maybe he's rested at the end there. So someone I'm sure can fill in the blanks for us and paint the narrative behind those scores. But like seeing the different scores throughout the quarter kind of reminds me of what looking at his scoring across the whole year was like from last year.
It was up and down a fair bit.
It was. There was kind of no rhyme nor reason. So
the other flags are there was no Connor McKenna in that game as well still. So he didn't play the last game, didn't play this game. And I think you said before, you would want to see him have like a high share of those kick-ins as well for someone like that to enter your squad. Flip side, he scores a 91.
Who was taking the kick-ins?
It was Wilmot. I think it was... who else was it? I think Zorko got a couple, weirdly enough. There was some... I think it shared around a fair bit. Yeah, Payne. Berry had one. Madden had one. So, yeah, a bit of a mix of different players. But, he didn't have a single one, which I thought was strange.
There's two ways to look at that, isn't there?
Yeah, if he does get kick-ins now, he's got more upside. Or at least that floor maybe is a little bit lower. And with some of those quarterly scoring breakdowns, I do think he does still present with a kind of scary floor, which is not always what you want to see. Angus Sheldrick, really quickly. Some people threw the name out there. I don't think I can get around this. I think it's a pretty easy pass for me. I know he was solid for us last year, but he's more expensive now. He scored 60 with 9 CBAs and 78% time on ground. So his knock was his low time on ground beforehand. Didn't score in a higher time on ground. I think it's just too unreliable in a midfield line where we do have a lot of better options, I think, to choose. So anything else to add about Sheldrick? Or
the only little thing might be that the stock's up when Taylor Adams is out.
Yep.
And they get the time to think about a more permanent rotation, whether he's more involved there. But we, like you say, we get a look. So
yeah, we get a look. And look, I mean, if he comes out and knocks out a 130, absolutely you can have a look at it just based on his price. But until then, I'm not super seriously considering a Sheldrick in my squad. Let's talk about GWS versus Gold Coast. And let's talk bang, bang, the Sex Pistol. He comes out and he knocks up a 115 for us. And just, like, we've got to go there, right? Like, unless he comes out and scores, again, a real big dud in opening round, he's a lock, right?
Yeah, I still think there is a little bit of concern over the moist run and what that does for an attacking halfback over the start of the season. But at his price, with what he's shown that he's able to do in that role that they've got him in, I think, you have to go there.
The fact that I saw him take the second most amount of kick-ins, and Will Powell was back there as well. So Powell took the most.
Yeah.
Sexton took the second most, and there was a big drop back down to Connor Buderick, who I think only had 1 or 2. To me, is a very good sign. The scoring is great, obviously. 11 marks. Now, he scored 115. We're not expecting that. But he's priced at
I am now
390 or odd. So he just needs to go,
He's priced at 42.
60,
So.
yeah, like 65, 70.
Yep.
And that's an awesome job. And I
Yep.
think there's no reason I can't see him doing that based on what we've seen in the 2 games so far. So
Yeah, for sure.
happy to lock him in unless he puts up an absolute stinker in round 0. On the flip side, I think Connor Buderick stocks down a little bit. I think Powell coming back affected him more than it did Sexton.
Yeah.
He just seemed to be like the third kind of option in a backline that had a few other guys. It sort of reminded me a bit of that like Bulldogs backline where they had like Ed Richards, Dale, Johannesson and those sort of types. Like you can't fit too many of them in. So Sexton's obviously the cheapest one. And so it's fine to fit him in, but the other guys, I don't know if they're going to be able to step up enough.
Now you were ready to hold a funeral on Thursday night, I think, for this next guy.
Yes.
Talk to us about.
Yeah, he didn't really. The role was the thing that concerned me more so. He scored 57, but the CBA's definitely dropped. Now, Humphreys came in and did a little bit more, but it was just a clearer separation between the top 3 and Flanders, who was the 4th guy.
Yeah.
Whereas in that first week of practice matches, it was sort of the top 4 separating from the rest.
Yeah, and we were sitting there 2 weeks ago almost thinking that he was more in the top 3 than any of the other
like
3
he might have been
guys
in there more than Anderson or
So
but
it just kind of went by the wayside. And this is interesting because even when he was scoring big at the end of last year, the huge CBA role wasn't necessarily there.
We've got Dimmer coming in now.
We do. There's a different game plan, but it's one game as well. That's the tough thing is you're going off. Yeah.
And this is the guy like I referenced before with Grundy. If this was all we were going to go off, it'd be a quite tough decision in my opinion because you've got 2 games where I think have different narratives. So you don't really have a clear kind of knowledge of what his role would be. I think if it was just off this game, I might be inclined to fade him with that early round bye.
Yeah.
But if he does come out and have a better role in that opening round where, points are up for grabs, scores, 95, 100 in that game, I'm still happy to go there and just put this down to sort of preseason experimentation and things like that. They also got smashed in this game. It wasn't very pretty. They were dominated at contests and it didn't look great, especially sort of second, third quarter. So I think that also drops his numbers down a little bit as well. But yeah, it's an interesting one. Definitely a big watch in round 0. One of the biggest, I think, actually, of the whole weekend.
What if his role stayed as it was this weekend, just gone, but the score was there?
I would feel much more comfortable still having him on my side. Again, we're looking for a role. Now, scoring is something. It's not 0, but it is always a role.
As we'll talk about with the last game of the round.
Useless. So I think the role definitely swings me because it's drop in CBAs and drop in points.
Yeah. Tough opposition.
There's a little bit more of a red flag. The red flag's a bit redder in that one there. The only player at Giants we can maybe talk ourselves into is the big man himself, Tom Green. He looks like he was just in cruise control. He got 107. Does it change your mind at all?
No, not for me. I'm going to be a little bit stubborn. I think at this point in the preseason, if I haven't really been on someone and nothing's really changed, then it would go against my thinking.
If you had to choose Goulden or Tom Green, who are you going?
Goulden.
I think I would too. Yeah.
Well, the bye is later.
A bit later. You've got those other injuries.
And I just love watching Aaron Goulden.
He's a thirsty boy, isn't he? Yes, I think he is probably my pick of the 2. Tom Green's got a safer role, but I also think he had a really safe and great role last year, and I don't know how much circumstances can improve for Tom Green.
They were good.
Did he lead? Am I right in saying he led the comp in disposals?
Oh, I'm not sure on the disposals, but I know
he might be right up there, either 1 or 2. So
the CBAs are in the mid-80s, which is
completely.
It's
going to be hard to top that, I think, again. Geelong versus Essendon. First off, before we start talking about players that we're actually going to pick, Jordan Ridley looks like he's injured his quad, and I don't think he's going to be there round 1. So that might affect some of the backline plays, namely Nick fucking Martin. He had the role, man. He had the role. He had the scoring. Yeah, I think the cat's out of the bag. I mean, we're all already kind of pretty all over it. He's not, I guess, a unique by any sense, but I think he's going to be a very popular starting mid-price option now with that score and that role.
Definitely.
Certainty to pretty much get DPP. Do we just have to have him?
In my opinion, we do. I will acknowledge I don't think he's going to kick 2 goals and have 11 marks every game.
No.
So that massive, don't expect a massive 120 ceiling every week. But I think it's Popowski's website that talks about those worthwhile.
He just needs to go 95 or so.
That's it with the anticipation of swinging him back. And I don't feel, correct me if you think differently, but I don't feel that this is one of those speculating on DPP things. It's like, unless
feels like a lock to me.
Unless something were to go completely wrong or, at Essendon over the next couple of weeks, I just really feel like he's settled into that.
And you've
role.
got, obviously, Jordan Ridley going down helps that certainty of him staying in that defence.
I think he might have to man up.
No, I do not.
Think he's capable of it?
I don't think he can, nor will, nor wants to. And I don't think Essendon cares either because they just want him to get the ball, and he can definitely do that. So I think of those mid-price midfielders, that 700k range, and we'll talk about a few of the other options, I think I would be ranking him at the very top. Would you agree with that, or is there others that you might go ahead of him?
He led Essendon's meters gained as well, so it's not like he's just waxing back there.
He's actually impactful.
He is, yeah. So mid prices that we're talking about there, I think is a really interesting discussion because you've obviously got a couple of guys there that are guys that you might be looking at DPP, so him and Amon, but then you've also got guys Crouch, Wines.
Yeah.
In that discussion as well. So of those 4, just in my opinion at the minute, he's the one that I'd like to go.
Yeah, I think I'd rank him 1, 2.
Not only because he's got DPP, but I actually think he's probably got a better ceiling.
I think he does.
Yeah,
he's the youngest of all of them. So he's getting better.
Yeah.
And he just hunts it, man. He's got that Dacos mentality. He may not have quite the Dacos level of talent, but he's got that license and mentality where he just screams for it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Geelong. Max Holmes is an interesting one. Not one that we've really talked about at all this preseason. Is he someone that you could consider? He's cheap. I think he's around that Huswaite price tag. Now, he is mid only, but definitely played halfback. He had some CBAs as well, so a bit of a mix. What do you think about Max Holmes? I know. Actually, sorry, no, he's a bit more expensive than the Huswaite. He's at 685, so he's actually probably up
close
near
to that
those brackets.
And
so
I think that's what does it for
more
me.
More expensive than I thought.
It's interesting. He looked awesome in that role in the little that I saw, and I don't expect that to change. It seems as though it's a concerted effort. They want him bouncing off the half-back line. But even when you dig into the stats, I think he ended up actually playing low time on ground because he came out a little bit early from the game.
I've got it here. He played 65% time on ground and nearly tonned up. What is it, 85? I think in that time. That's pretty solid.
I think it's solid.
88.
It's definitely solid. The other way that I kind of looked at it as well, which just was a little flag, was if you have 29 touches, I'd probably want more than.
Yeah,
88
zero tackles and only 4 marks.
So you're
Geelong
probably
have changed and they're a bit more direct now.
Yeah, in that role, you're not going to get a heap of tackles. But 29 touches bouncing off the halfback, you'd want that to be 100. I'm not saying that he wouldn't be a good pick, but I just think that there's better options around the price.
Yeah, it didn't have any kick-ins, and he did have CBAs. So he's another one there as well where you pick him with the DPP in mind, but I don't know if this one's a certainty like the Nick Martin because
we don't get enough out of the Cats to know what they're thinking.
The Cats don't say anything, and also they had 30 fucking guys going through the midfield. They move things not only game to game, but sometimes within the games as well. So you're picking him if you're expecting to be able to move him back to defence. I don't know if that's a guarantee, and like I said, more expensive than I thought. Even just remembering at 685k, you want him again to go that 90 plus and get DPP. I think there are other options I'd prefer.
The only thing I would say is that he did look right at Holmes down there, so it would be a tick in his.
Or right at Holmes, right? I missed that completely. What do you think though? So I think he's a bump up in draft, but what do you think though? Holmes affects Tom Stewart, or do you think it affects Tom Stewart at all?
Oh, I think it's maybe a little early to say, but I think it's enough of a thing to think about that if you were picking Tom Stewart, because you weren't picking Tom Stewart for some unbelievable value. you were picking Tom Stewart to do.
Yeah, he was a guy that you think is going to be top 6. He's got a good run opening to start the season. But there was always that argument. He's got a little bit of value because of that inbuilt injury at the round 1 game where he, I think it was a 14 or something. So he averaged after that 100. He's priced at 95. So you've got like a little bit there. But maybe is that no longer there? Are you kind of more or less paying for what you're going to get for Tom Stewart if you've got a upcoming player coming into a similar type position?
Yeah, I'm going to reserve reservations on that one.
Because I think he's in a lot of people's teams. And now I don't worry about his performance there. Now, he didn't score very well. What did he have, like a 65 or something like that? He was just in cruise control. 61, kicked a goal as well. But he was, I don't think I'm worried about his performance, but the emergence of Holmes maybe just tempers my expectation on him going above his price.
Yeah, I think he'll do what he did last season, to be honest. I think
that's more.
But you're still not looking at a significant amount of value.
No, I don't think so.
I think now from what we saw this afternoon, I think I'll be picking Sheasel before I pick Stewart.
I think there's a few other guys that have stepped up for me, and Tom Stewart hasn't necessarily stepped down, but I'm not as excited or as enthusiastic about him as maybe I was a couple weeks ago. Let's go to Freo versus Port. Lots to talk about in this game here. Let's maybe start with the Port Adelaide Power, because fucking Zach Butters rolls his ankle in the first quarter. Not even on anyone, just stumbles his way at the back of a marking contest, I think it was. Rolls his ankle, tweaks his ankle, I'll say.
Yeah.
They put him on ice, doesn't play the rest of the game. He scored like 11 in like 5 or whatever minutes he was out there.
Yeah.
What does this mean? How do we approach this?
It's so horrible because no matter how minor that injury was, he was never going to take any more part in it.
He's done. Yeah.
We sit here thinking, well, is it minor or is there a little bit more to it?
Yeah.
And they'll come out and they'll say, no, he would have played on. Yep. But then you ask yourself, well, I'm picking a guy that I effectively want to take the next step and be a gun premium midfielder.
Yeah.
Am I now paying a lot of money for someone who could come into the season underdone?
Yeah, I mean, and like I said off the top of the show, he was a guy that had not moved from my side. I'd had him in my side basically the entire preseason, and now I've just got this question. Personally, looking at the injury, looking at the vision, it didn't look very bad at all to me. It looked like someone who's tweaked the ankle. He's jogged off. He's looked a little proppy, but he's proper jogged off. And he's got, 2 weeks until that first game against West Coast. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing.
Yeah, true.
I don't know. I don't know if overreacting is the word, but like if he spent all that time in my team and I like what I saw in terms of just the data and the numbers, is this enough for me to just go, yep, you're out, I'm putting someone else in? And the other thing that's really annoying is it affects the rest of the rotations in the midfield in terms of getting a read on how much, Rosie and Wines and, Mead, who was in there more than I expected, Drew. Like, it kind of just muddles that data up a little bit. So, very frustrating, but I don't blame you if you want to just get him out of your team. But I also don't think that, for me, I'm ruling him out of contention in my team, especially if we hear wording over the next week or so that he is training with the team in full drills and things like that. And if it is something that really was super minor and he's not limited in training over the next week or so, he might stay in my team. But still some water to go under the bridge there. Yeah,
I think I definitely echo those sentiments. Keeping with the Port Adelaide theme,
yes.
Ollie Wines, I think regardless of what happened to Butters, I feel like we were going to see the high CBAs of Ollie Wines.
Well, it's bang, bang. Like last week it was there. This week, obviously, Butters is not there, but it was there again.
Yeah. So with that high CBA role, he managed to get himself to a 95, and I thought looked pretty good. Again, with options around that price, is he someone that has made his way into Mitchmond?
Well, he made his way into Mitchmond the last game, and he's still there.
Okay.
I think he ticked the boxes. I think he's a guy that, again, if we're talking about that ranking of those 4 players, to me, it's him and Crouch that are probably the 2 closest to me. At the moment, I would favour Wines because I have more certainty about his role in the squad in terms of just being a more important player in their team. He's closer. He's not in any risk, I think, of being dropped or anything like Crouch maybe potentially is. I think his time on ground is going to be a bit higher.
Yeah.
The question rises from Port's scoring as a team. them being the lowest scoring team last year from a fantasy points production point of view. But you can look at that as a positive and say, well, there's only room but to go up. So, I don't know. It's a tough one. Where do we see his upside being? Like, what do you think his ceiling could be, like, at a high-end outcome? Do you think he could, if everything lines up, averages 100? Or
I think if everything lines up, he could average 100. But that would be a lot of things adding up, especially what we anticipate Butters and Rosie will do.
Yes.
There as well. So I think that perhaps what you got on the weekend is going to be like the high end of his scoring, and then it's going to be somewhere there between 85 and 95, which I think the higher end of that will be enough.
Yeah.
And it's a guy that hopefully, if he can start a little bit better than that, you
He's got West Coast round 1, so that always helps.
Could help, and you capitalise on a little bit of a price increase, and then maybe you get off while things are good.
Yeah. So yeah, I think he ticked the boxes for me there. Rosie, what do we think about him? Is he someone who's elevated with this Butters injuries a bit more, or?
Oh, I don't think we can say that he's elevated. I think Butters will play round 1, and like you said at the start, it's a tough read because in the previous week we actually saw Rosie play more forward time.
We did.
So I don't know now whether Rosie got a little bit more ball just because Butters was out.
He was still behind Horn Francis and Willem Drew. Now he plays 73% time on ground. But it's only 3% behind what Wines played, and Wines had 6 more centre bounce attendances. So, I don't know.
He played really, really well.
Great. He's a great player.
Port were pretty dominant from memory in this one, and it became a little bit of a training drill to finish as well. I think
they did rest him a little bit more down the back end of the game. Yeah, he only played 47% of the final quarter, so basically set out the second half of that final term. So
yeah, my thinking on Rosie hasn't sort of changed. I don't think I'm going to go there, but God, he's a good player.
He's a great player. And I think I didn't get much of a strong read on Soldo versus Sweet. I think they both seem pretty even to me. But it just makes me feel like even if Sweet is named solo ruck, on any week they could switch that. Yeah. What are you doing?
Oh, I just thought it went Sweet named Soldo ruck.
Soldo ruck. Yeah, no.
Just had me confused. Simpleton like myself.
Right there. But yeah, I'm not very likely to go Sweet R3, I think, at this stage.
Now, can we finally talk about the GOAT?
Hayden Young?
Hayden
Young. Lock him in, mate. There's not too much to discuss at all,
what
really.
A beast. He has to be locked in.
Top CBA getter for the...
2 goals, 3. That could have been a 150.
He dominated, right? And I think there was been some strong glowing quotes from the coach coming out that he was one of the few players that rose to the contest. And
Port Adelaide are hard to score against, aren't they?
Yeah, not for the GOAT. Not for the GOAT that Hayden Young is. 7 tackles. He's in there, man.
He's got to be in there.
A few people panicked last week when he moved back to defence. No panic here. We always believed in the great man. And yes, lock him into your side. Don't even think twice about it. Throw out the keys. So yeah, he's all good. Brayshaw though.
Yes. Maybe keep the keys.
Keep the keys. Unlock the lock and get him out. Well, look, I still think he'll be good. And it's not like he's going to go from someone who was like 75% to a 40% CBA guy. But when you're paying 110, you want everything to be just
zero
tip-top,
question marks.
No question marks.
You want to be yeeting those keys.
Yes. And I don't know if we can. He's out of my side as we speak.
2 games in a row where we've seen dodgy wing-related stuff. So
he'll still be good.
Yes, of course. Of course.
He might even average 110. But I was picking him with the hope that maybe he can go that 114, 15, 16.
Yeah, you want certainty.
If that wing roll is there, I don't see him pushing that up. So I'm just going to take a punt somewhere else, I think, is my personal opinion. Just not exactly what you want to see. The other player that we'll talk about from Freo, and actually 2 more, I probably forgot to put someone on the run sheet here, Fifey.
Yeah, can I lead the discussion on 5? So last week he played the half game, and I think the stat watchers were giving us the information that he had 20 touches in the first half, which is fantastic. He's obviously killing it, and the CBA role is there. But even in from memory, even in the seasons where he was winning Brownlows, he wasn't like a 120 fantasy guy. And
105 is his season best.
And the thing is, he's had 20 touches in the first half last week, and in this game he had 26 touches. That's fantastic. What a game. But he's only managed 58 from those 26 touches. Yeah. So the role's there. He's influential in terms of what he's doing, but just not from a fantasy perspective. So
You pick him price at 55.
Yeah.
You want him to average 75.
And
that means he's going to have some games in the 90s to off-weight like some of these games.
Yeah.
I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, if you have 26 touches in a game, there's every chance that you're going to have some ceiling scores because there'll be games where the tackles line up, the marks line up and those things. But I just look at that Freo mix in there now and I think, well, who's going to be doing the dirty work? It's Sarong. It's Hayden Young. Who's going to be popping out for the +6s? It's Brayshaw. It's Sarong now as well. So I think that Nat Fyfe just adds that element of inside class with just elite, ball use by hand. He'll farm it out to those kind of guys as well. But I just can't 100% sell myself on the fact that he's going to go 75 plus.
Agreed. And then you've got the risk of, potentially if the game's in no doubt, the subbing him out, managing his minutes and things like that. It was good to see him play 75% time on ground. I think that's actually higher than I expected in a game like this. But yeah, to me, I will change my mind if I see it in the season and the scoring is there. But for right now, I haven't seen enough for a Fyfe myself personally. Last one here for this game, Jordan Clark. Did we see enough? Because with the defense line the way it is, it's difficult. 81 is probably one of the more difficult scores to kind of get a read on because, again, we talk about not wanting to see scores. That's not the thing, but when you price it, what's he priced at? Like a high 70s kind of mark?
Yeah, we need him to go more than 81 is the cut and dry of it.
Yeah, he had 4 kick-ins compared to Luke Ryan's 7. So
I've been a little bit more bullish than perhaps you have with Jordan Clark. He looks to me as though he has that distributor role of halfback. So I know there was a few years ago, I don't think I was playing fantasy, but he had a big score in the preseason. A few people jumped on him and got burnt. I think that this is probably a better scenario where we've seen 2 games in a row where Hayden Young's going to be a midfielder. He's going to have that main distributor and he's going to do a little bit of sharing of the kick-ins with Luke Ryan. Stat line on the weekend, he's had 6 tackles, but 2 marks. He's not going to have 6 tackles every game, but he's also not going to have 2 marks every game.
You would think so.
So, I don't know, were Port tough for defenders to score against as
well?
Tough
for everyone to score against, except for Rucks.
So, that kind of, an 81, can you look at that as somewhere between a 90 and 100, and he's going to have more than 2 marks?
We do need to take it, that's a good point, that we do need to take into the fact there was a Port matchup, and they are very restrictive. They don't let you take those uncontested marks. So, that is definitely something to factor in here. I'm still very uncertain. To me, his place in my team is going to be maybe dictated based on some of those round 0 defenders in like a Christian Salem and a Kadeem Coleman and some of those other options potentially. He's still in the mix. How would you rank some of those guys? So say we're talking sort of like a Salem, a Clark, a Yo, a Kadeem Coleman, a Rivers you might even want to throw in there. Some of those options up the top or in that sort of 600-ish kind of to 700k mark for defenders. Do you have him at the top there, or
in my opinion, if the Salem role is good, like if the Salem role is a midfield role, I think he has the best and safest ceiling of the 3 of them. And then I'd have Clark, and then Coleman after that. I think that even though you're paying an extra 60, 70k. I mean,
the round 2 buy, like of those 2 options, Clark is the one without the buy.
I think that weighs into it a little bit for me, and I've been off Kitty Coleman all preseason as well, so I'm
feels
almost
a bit like you're jumping into something that you haven't really loved.
And I think I'm almost to the point where I'm going to kind of live or die by that take a little bit.
Yeah.
No,
it's a tough one. I find it really tough to get a gauge on Jordan Clark, and when I can't get a gauge on it, I don't love to jump into those kind of a pick. But he still has a chance to make my team. And if someone was really hot on him and strong on him, I wouldn't definitely talk you out of it. I might even still potentially go there myself. But he's definitely on one of those guys that is in and out a lot of my team at the moment, depending on where I need to make some cash and things like that.
Let's hit this next game, hey. We're going to go for hours here.
Luckily we're not talking rooks in this one.
We've got fantasy relevant games coming up. Hey?
Adelaide versus West Coast. Yep. Maybe the first one you'll see when you look at the stats on this one was Isaac Rankin. Kicked 4 goals, played lots of CBAs. He only played the first 3 quarters as well, so turned up in 3 quarters, sat the 4th quarter. My question to you is, the roll tick, great.
Yeah.
Is the scoring sustainable for someone like a Rankin in a game style like Adelaide, and for what they're asking him to do and be in this team?
My initial suspicion is no, but I don't know if that's because I've got him pegged as a player that he's not.
That's my knee-jerk reaction too, but I wonder if that's maybe just historical kind of...
Yeah, I almost feel like have I got him picked as just this small forward that's just going to provide burst in there when in actual fact he's actually an elite endurance beast and he's just been biding his time in the forward line. Obviously, the 4 goals is not... going to happen every week, and like we said, that this game obviously was a training drill almost from the start for Adelaide.
Keeping in mind he was versing West Coast.
He was. I think that it looks as though
probably
Adelaide
averaged 1 goal a game. Would you say?
Yeah, it looks as though Adelaide's pretty keen on that role. But for me, in my mind, I'd probably need to just see it for a couple more weeks. And I think priced at what's he priced at? Mitch,
he's a bit more up there. I think he's like
74.
Yeah.
So if he started going bananas and a guy like Butters, LDU, Steele didn't do what we wanted, then it could be a guy that you could get onto. Yeah. But initially my thought is just... am I right in... I can't remember the stats of it,
so
but
you want
I feel
it to be
like...
top 6 forward.
I feel like Cozzy Pickett did a similar thing to a lot of people last year.
Yeah, probably might be a good comparison. I think Cozzy Pickett wasn't in as much as what we've seen Rankin do so far.
Yeah.
And even like Rankin last year, we kind of have a thought that he was in there a bit last year. He really wasn't much at all. There was maybe 1 or 2 games at the start of the season. But the other thing that also runs through my mind is that there are a few other guys. Pedler, Saligo, Rochelle, like Rankin. Even you saw someone like Sam Berry in there a bunch this time. I don't know if this is something that, despite us seeing it 2 games in a row in the preseason, that maybe in 4 games' time, it's someone else.
Well, at the end of the day, he's only had 8 CBAs out of 28.
Yeah,
as well.
In 3 quarters, but yes. Yeah. So there'd probably be double digits if he played that 4th quarter. So at this stage, I'm probably a no, like you.
Yeah.
But definitely stocks up, I think. If
sure.
in draft, you definitely bump him up. And even when the season starts, you keep an eye on him as maybe a pivot option for some of those other guys. Let's talk about Matt Crouch. Where would you, again, we're going to refer to those big 4 midfielders because I think that'll be a question for a lot of people. Big 4 mid-price midfielders. Martin, Crouch, Ollie Wines, Amon. Where does Crouch sit for you in that ranking? Is he ahead of Wines?
I think the weekend probably put him slightly behind Wines. I think that Crouch's scoring potential is better, but the fact that I'm pretty confident that he's not going to play a really high time on ground role.
That's my fear.
And I don't think the CBA percentage is going to be quite as high as Ollie Wines. Like, you think about the class that Adelaide have got running through that midfield. And, I mean, obviously Port Adelaide have class as well. I get that too.
Yeah.
But I just don't see him being a huge time on ground guy, and I probably don't see those CBAs creeping much over 60%.
Oh, see, I reckon they could be over 60%. He was second behind Laird with 16 CBAs out of those 28, did you say?
But Dawson...
in 59% time on ground. So you tick that up another 10, 15% point. I think he's going to be up there. He might be sort of that 65% to 70% CBA guy.
Dawson's going to have more CBAs than him.
Yes, I think Dawson and Laird are going to be up there.
So that comes off Crouch's CBAs.
But I think Crouch is the third guy.
You're probably right. He probably is the third guy, and then it's just a mishmash of guys after that.
Yeah.
So... yeah, maybe.
He's a points per minute guy, but it's still, when you're picking a mid-pricer, that the low time on ground just adds an element of variability. Like, when he's out there, he's got to be on. Like, he has to be scoring big when he's got that time.
Yep.
When he's off, obviously, he can't score points. So it would only take, like, one quiet quarter for him not to have the opportunity to make that back up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not to say that he can't be a big pick, but, and this is the other question, I guess, is a lot of people will be asking, how many of those mid-pricer guys in the midfield can you start?
Yeah, it is an interesting question.
2 or 3 or 4? Can you start all 4, Luke?
Mike, well, the way LDU played an hour ago, maybe we'll be looking down. But this is an interesting one for the comments, I think, because a lot of people...
How many of these guys are you starting between those 4? I think there is a world where you can start 3 of them. I think I'm going to be at least starting 2 of them. I think you want to go at least 2, personally. I think they all have a world where they're going to go up, and if they don't work, one of the other guys will, so you can pivot. I think 2 is a sweet spot, but 3 might also be the world if you do really like what you saw from Matt Crouch. And maybe an Amon as well. Let's keep moving along. Laird and Dawson, the way I counted it, especially those first 3 quarters, the last quarter, they definitely sat more on the bench. But the first 3 quarters, they had maybe 1 or 2 rotations forward, but were pretty much pure inside mids. So I like those 2 guys. There was a few quotes about Laird playing forward. I'm not worried about that one. I still think he's going to be fine. So, yeah, are you no real dramas on Laird or Dawson there? Are they players that might feature in your team, depending on how you want to structure up?
Yeah, potentially. Maybe more Dawson now than
Dawson.
Laird.
Yeah.
He's such a gun, so good to watch, but we do have to keep moving on, otherwise we're going to
okay, let's
go
keep going.
2 hours.
Elliot Yo's role looked good, tackled well. My question, though, is West Coast still going to be so shit that it's going to limit his ceiling and potential value because they might just not get enough ball?
Yeah, 81 on 9 tackles is probably...
We want him to go 90, probably.
You do. And 9 tackles, as much as he is a tackling beast, 9 tackles is not going to be
No one's going to
sustained.
average 9 tackles, but...
He's going to have more
he'll
touches.
do that every second game, I would have assumed. But.
He hasn't left the Oxlongs, put it that way, but he also hasn't filled me with a heap of confidence. But, I mean, this is a tough thing. We don't get another look at him. So, it's really going to be dictated by what we see from other people in round 0.
I personally think I've seen enough, especially with a few other question marks. Like I would have him ahead of a Jordan Clark, I think, still at this stage.
Okay.
So no early buy. I'm gonna take that leap, I think, unless he bloody pinks his hammy between now and start of round 1. Knock on wood. Still sitting. Oh, and actually, he's down to my D5 at the moment, so he's out of that cursed D4 spot. A few people would be happy to know.
Who have you got there? Just full transparency. Who's getting
Jordan Clark? Oh, so he's screwed. And I don't think there's any reason for people to panic on Harley Reid. Some people were worried about his scoring last week.
Yep.
Never left my side. I think let's just all chill out. He's going to be fine.
West Coast are not going to let him.
They have
perform.
too much at stake.
Do you know what I mean? So so if at any point he's not getting enough peel or he has a bad game, they're going to go, you go out and do whatever the fuck you want, Harley.
And they'll tell everyone else, get him the ball.
Yeah, exactly.
Because otherwise, the media
memberships are
going
to spiral.
We're going to be in the spotlight. So he's the only thing really going for them this season. So they'll make sure that he has at least a decent rookie season.
Poor young kid too. Everything the commentators said. I think there was a piece of commentary at the end of the game where it was like, well, West Coast season's in shambles, but at least they've got the great hope, Harley Reid. this poor bastard he's got the hopes of a whole state weighing on his shoulders.
On the guy. But in fantasy terms, I said we were going to talk on rookies, but don't worry about him. Don't panic. Let's talk about Hawthorn versus Bulldogs, and this is very interesting because I watched the first half of this game, and then I went to the movies, saw a great movie in Dune Part 2. Go and check it out.
You getting kickbacks? Or?
No, but fuck, it was a good movie. Jai Newcomb. Talk to me, because I checked my phone after the movie and saw this score, and I went, oh, okay.
Yeah.
127.
It's big. It's big. And
what did he look like?
Well, he was tracking well at halftime, as you knew as well. It's not like he was going poorly, but then he really kicked it up in the second half, and other people would have been watching as well. But I just felt as though he was getting real thirsty on those short 45s, which is something I don't know if I'd seen from him before. But he was demanding the pill in the short 45s, and his teammates were obliging as well. So he was doing all the things that I think we were hoping and expecting. I think it was enough for me to say, hey, this guy might be ready to take the next step, and especially with Will Day being absent for the first at least 3 rounds. I think he's going to have to be the big dog in there, and that could translate to big dog scoring. Yeah,
he is definitely someone that I think if he wasn't on your radar, he should now be. And if he was on your radar, it's definitely a big tick in the right direction.
Yep.
Whether it's a tick in the right direction enough for you to maybe change some guys that you maybe did like, if you want to go a Crouch up to him, or maybe a Butters down to him, if that spooks you enough. It's an interesting price point as well. Like the 93, 94, I think, where he's priced at. You're wanting him to be a premium mid if you're selecting him there. And the other interesting thing is that, and I've talked about this before, he is not the tackler that I think I expect and have in my mind, at least from the stats point of view.
When you look at him, he's built like a brick shit.
It looks like he should average 7 tackles a game, but he averaged 4 last year, and he did that again in this game. He built his score based on the marks and the disposals.
Yeah, he only had 3 tackles.
Didn't have many tackles. Now, in a preseason game, maybe that's expected because we're not as contested. So could there be even more upside there? But it is something that the way in which I kind of envisioned him improving his score was on the back of him getting an extra couple tackles per game. We didn't see it in this game here, but the scoring is obviously still there. 37 disposals is really good. Interesting one.
Yeah, 37 disposals is not something that you look at and think, well, that's going to happen every week. But he's gone so far and above what we would be hoping anyway that there's...
Yeah, like I said, if you were interested... Big tick.
I think so. Even if he came out and did a 105, I think people who were interested would still go, yeah, that's enough. So if that he's given a 130, you think, well, he has put his hand up. So I'm sure you'll go back and watch the second half of that game. But
I will, yes, absolutely.
But, let me know your thoughts when you do.
Karl Amon led the team in kick-ins, and at least from what I saw in the first half, and you told me this as well, there wasn't as much chip-to-chip action like what we saw at the end of last season for Hawthorn, and he still managed to score a 94. Can we read that as a positive thing for Karl Amon? The other thing we should mention here as well, that Sicily only scored, what did he have? He had a 61 with only 4 marks there.
Yeah, I think...
Are we reading into the fact that maybe Amon's more preferred, or could you view it the other way, that Sicily's going to get more than what he did today, and that eats into that scoring?
I think Amon's probably going to be the preferred distributor. Just Sicily's going to be a selfless team guy at the end of the day, I think, as well. He can pick it up when it's required of him, but he can also then go and play accountable, which I think might be required of him more often this year as well.
Yep.
The Karl Amon thing is interesting too. I think Hawthorn will play a quicker game style, which won't lend itself to massive mark numbers. But I think there are going to be situations throughout the year that demand... a little bit of waxing, and I think Karl Amon's probably going to average more than 4 marks a game. If I was a betting man, I'd probably take the overs there. So 94 on just the 4 marks, and he obviously had the monopoly on the kick-ins for the most part there. I think that I would be seriously considering it if Nick Martin didn't do what he did, and I don't know if I'm going to pick 2 guys that I'm expecting.
This is the thing. How many of these halfback types... Go away, Siri.
Not even Siri understands.
Siri doesn't know. But how many of those halfback guys can you have with the expectation that a lot of us are going to be having a deeper defence line?
I think it'd be pretty arrogant to go Martin and Amon and just go, well, I'm going to flick these guys back and it's all going to be happy as Larry and everything's just going to turn out well for me.
D5 is Elliot Yeo, so you've got all these guys who are 650k plus, and you've got Colby McKercher there who...
Starting to get busy.
It's busy. It doesn't matter if he goes 105, but it does matter in terms of like that line moving to if he is expected to be a defender versus if he's expected to be a mid.
The only thing I think that it would work in your favour is that right at the moment we don't know where that top 8 midfield battle is going to settle. Yeah. And so if you're of the opinion that you want a few weeks to look at which midfielders you want, maybe you could say, well, I'll pick these guys in the anticipation that they go back, and then I've opened up a couple of spots to bring in those performing mids.
I don't know why, but if we talk about those 4 players, I have him last.
Okay.
I don't know why. I think that I'm just worried about... I mean, like, Scrimshaw also popped in there and had some kick-ins as well. Maybe I'm just a little bit less certain on the fact that he's going to be a pure halfbacker, and they do have a few halfbacks there at Hawthorn. But... yeah, that's more maybe just a gut feel. So if someone was really hot on Karl Amon, I wouldn't talk them out of it. There's definitely a world where he scores better than both those mids. I think I'm pretty confident going Nick Martin over him.
Yes, I agree in that sense, yeah.
And so if you just trust him more so than those midfielders, I can easily see that world. So I think those final 3 are sort of pretty close, whereas I have Martin kind of like a bit of a gap ahead of the other players. Let's talk about some of the younger kids there as well. In Cam McKenzie, he only had the 4 CBAs, but still looked really good in the half that I saw.
Yeah.
Even if it's the mostly wing role with just a little bit of CBAs, is he cheap enough that we just start anyway? Because he looked pretty good.
Yeah, in my opinion, yes. I think from the eye test, I think he passed as well. So when he went out to that wing, there was certainly no... perpendicular head or anything like that. He was still looking to get the footy and spreading deep into defensive 50 to help out the defenders and be that link kick as well. So for me, he's in there, and I'd have to see something else in round 0 from someone else, see something good from someone else to go away from him, actually.
I think he's definitely in consideration for me. I don't think he's locked in for me, but again, I wouldn't talk anyone out of it. I don't see myself going with this next guy in Hustwaite.
Yep.
He looked good in that first half, but I was surprised to see, or at least that first quarter, he dominated. Had 32 points in it, but in quarters 2 and 3, he had 6 and then 9 in those 2 quarters combined. So, yeah, it's, to me, as a mid-only, when we're talking about some of these other value options there, it's too awkward of a price for me. So I don't think I'm going to be going there and starting him. I know you're a bit hotter. Are you ruling him out? Or
yeah,
you still...
I've definitely liked the role that I've seen over the last couple of weeks. Even watching that second half, there were quite a few instances, and I think it's because I was watching him so closely that the kick just didn't quite hit him, and he missed out on a +6, or the tackle just didn't quite stick, and those are things where you go, oh well, am I looking too closely and looking for things that I want to find? But the awkward price definitely is the kicker, I think, and probably the reason why I don't think I'll end up going there either.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's talk about the Bulldogs. Bont English still top of their game. English is still the number 1 pick and draft for me personally, despite people loving Rowan Marshall. We don't really need to talk about them much. James Harms.
Yep.
We haven't talked about him too much on the podcast, but he is getting some love out in the community. He had some CBAs, but also played high half forward. What are your thoughts on James Harms? I mean, I haven't brought him up on the podcast because I don't see much of a ceiling for him. But do you see it differently?
Well, I think you only sort of need him to do, let's say, 80, mid-80s would be nice. He's priced at...
let me just double check that one. He's priced at 70.5. So, yeah, just over 70. So you probably need him to go, 85?
Yeah, I think
High
so.
80s?
And there's actually... as much as we talked about the forward line being just so dire at the start of the season, well, there's a few options that are reasonably cheap as well. So he hasn't been someone that's come into the calculations. And you mentioned the ceiling before as well. Even though he is going to get some of that CBA time, I know that the Bulldogs midfield is just this fountain of points. It's like the never-ending points.
It is,
thing.
yeah.
But I also think that at some point there's going to be someone who can't score 100.
Yeah.
And
so Harms he's had this very role before in a Melbourne Demons team where he gets like 30%, and his ceiling for his career, I think, is that low 80s mark.
I think I saw a 90 in there. Let me fact check that.
Double check that. But you're right in saying that the Bulldogs midfield is more friendly for points. But you've also got Bont, Libba, Treloar, English, who's going to still play as basically a fourth midfielder. They're going to get all those points and cheaper ball first. He's a bit more of that harder defensive type. And what's that, 93 there for? Okay, so you had one season there, 2019, fair while ago. But I don't know. If you were keen on him, I don't think it did any harm. He scored 77, which is not any harm. Good. Got to be clued into myself. But it's still probably not enough. So I don't think he's a bit down the order for me in terms of those forwards. Nick Caulfield, like what we saw from him. He didn't score amazingly, but he's also super cheap, 59. I liked what I saw in that first half. He took a few intercept marks. I think he's locked into their best team, personally.
I think he looked good, yeah. And he's actually got a bit of an aerial ability as well. We saw a couple of good defensive...
He's a big lad.
Bigger than I first expected as well, but a couple of good defensive aerial contests as well, and then even the ability, even the ability to take some one-on-one marks was good too. So, like you said, we only need him to go 60, a little bit of cash.
Feel good about his job security after watching that, especially. And just to round it out, I think Caleb Daniel is in the he's in the doghouse. At the Bulldogs.
Sorry, yeah. No, gotcha. Sorry, mate.
Because he didn't play until the third quarter?
And then played the...
Is he going to be there round 1?
It's sketchy.
You obviously can't go there anymore.
Maybe he's been frazzled because he's no longer the shortest player in the AFL.
Oh, we did learn that today with... was it Watson?
Nick Watson,
yeah. From Hawthorn. Far out.
But yeah, perhaps he is in the doghouse. He didn't play till you said the third quarter, and then was he still playing that weird half forward?
I didn't see this one, but yeah, 33 points suggests that in half, but yeah, rule him out, line through. I think for him.
I think so too.
I was ever really considering it, but and drop him down your draft board, I think as well.
Yeah.
All right, let's go into the final game here. Longest podcast of the preseason, I reckon. North Melbourne versus St Kilda, and I just had to put this one in there.
The fish. Let's go.
And he is a thirsty fish,
He was looking like a fast little fish. What's a fast fish? He was looking like a barracuda. Ooh.
Barracuda. A Marlin? I don't know.
Marlin, yeah.
But yeah, this
He's
guy
good.
led the scoring, I think, for North Melbourne. Tunned up, I believe, had 36 touches. So he's a lock, right? Surely.
Yeah, I think so. I think that he's dispelled any potential
awareness. You know what's good about Fish as well? Short memories. So
nice.
Forgotten about his hamstrings.
That's smart by him.
Completely forgotten about him. He's
Lack
not aware
of
of them
awareness.
anymore. Yeah. So he's
Good call.
I think he's locked into my side. I don't know what more you could really expect from him.
Do you want to do your Fish impersonation?
No, I do not.
Okay.
I will pass on that one.
We'll say that. I'll get a bit of behind the scenes footage for that.
Let's talk about the bad though. LDU.
Oh my goodness gracious me.
Back to LD useless in this game.
We don't want to look too much at score in these games for these kind of players, but we want to look at roll.
38?
38, you have to notice that score because the roll was good. He only missed sort of the latter half of the fourth quarter when they put him on ice.
He sat down in the second half, like the last half of the final quarter. But he was in there a fair bit.
I know he's not going to give away 8 free kicks every game or whatever it was.
He gave away a shit ton, but
38 is
79% TOG.
And what were his CBAs?
The highest of the team, 19.
Oh my goodness, 38. That's enough to scare you off.
38. This is another player that has not moved from my team all preseason, and he dishes me this.
But we won't start with him, and he'll go back to back.
This will turn a lot of people off as well.
Myself included, probably.
He will now be quite unique, which is even more scary when you see a score like this. And maybe it is him to a Newcomb or him to an Ollie Wines or something like that you do. You
did mention that particular game that we just watched was quite a low stoppage game.
It will look nothing like that in the preseason, in the actual season.
So these are the kind of things where we say, well, are we jumping at shadows if the tackle numbers and the stoppage numbers are going to double?
But is it Northball? Is it the fact that they're playing faster?
Yeah, look, it could well be. 38 is very scary.
It's gross.
Because it shows, I think it shows a flaw.
It definitely does. And there's been people like the great man Selby himself who said he's a better footballer than a fancy football player.
He's better than 38, but...
He's better than 30. Obviously, he's not going to be getting 30, but it's like you're paying for him to be a premium.
You are.
And... I want to pick him because I don't want to have to change my whole midfield mix that's been sitting there the whole time.
Well, is it just...
But... you're going to look like an idiot if you start him anyway and he comes out as a shit pick and you just go back and go, dude, he scored a 38. Why the fuck did you start this guy?
And then in the opposite, if you don't start him and he scores well, then everyone's going, oh, you overreacted.
The role was there. You overreacted.
You know what I mean? You can't win. So I don't know. I'm going to just...
This is a really tough one.
I'm going to think on that one for a little bit because...
I'm leaning to giving him the boot after that, I reckon.
What if you went him to Newcomb? But that to me then is if you've been committed to LDU,
you're not even making much cash going from him to Newcomb. They're similar price.
Yeah, well, that's. I'm not talking about it as a cash grab. I'm talking about it as Newcomb fucking looked good and LDU scored a 38. But let me just sleep on that one, perhaps, so I don't overreact.
That's a tough one, but I'd imagine he is going to be dropping in ownership very quickly after that performance. Tristan Xerri was also another one that maybe was a little bit underwhelming. I'm a little bit more forgiving for him here. He also gave away several free kicks. He at least managed to get to a 68, which is above his price.
Yeah.
So
low stoppage.
When you talk about, low stoppage, St Kilda was the lowest stoppage team, I think, last season anyway, and in a game like this, in a preseason matchup, it was
Were they the lowest stoppage team?
Yeah,
and Roma was
as good as he was.
Impressive.
So I think that's okay. And again, we talked about Grundy being underwhelming before.
Yeah.
This will be an interesting decision for people if they do want to lock in a max score and going a Grundy or a Cherry because you will get another look at Grundy, whereas this is the last we'll see of Tristan Cherry. I don't think it changes my mind too much on him based on this game. I would have liked to see more, but I'm not too discouraged. What about Tom Powell? He's an interesting one in this game.
Yeah, because we were sitting there in the first quarter thinking, wow, this role looks good.
He looked great.
This guy's, around that 500k mark.
I think I had him in my team for 10 minutes.
Yeah. And then, but this is the thing is I have to think that it coincided with Simking getting concussed. him moving out, because it almost seemed immediate after that fact that when
Will
Phillips came
in
on for the first time, they almost said, okay, well, Phillips is only going to play midfield, so Powell, you go park yourself on a half-forward flank or whatever it was. So that, again, we don't get another look at North Melbourne. It makes it very difficult.
Is it a case of, if, say, Jai Simpkins there...
And Powell's not named.
Phillips isn't
Phillips
named.
Not named.
Can we launch into it? It's risky.
It's super risky, but I think that would have to come along with some sort of wording from the coach or something coming out of the club. If that came along with something else, then I think I could potentially...
North play on the Saturday
against GWS.
So I'm just thinking in terms of rolling lockout, how many would that change your structure and things like that? It might. There's only 3 games before them, so maybe you still have a bit of movement and fluidity.
And it depends who the players are. So like Hawthorn, if you've got a Mackenzie, he's going to be locked away.
He's locked away beforehand. You've got Sydney with James Jordan and stuff like that. Away.
Someone like Billings is not going to be.
No, Billings will still be available, but
it's interesting.
It's an awkward sort of time. So it probably lends itself more to a player that you watch, and if he pops in round 1 or 2, you trade into him.
Yeah.
But like you, I really liked what I saw in that first quarter, and I thought he did look good, even though the scoring definitely dried up. So even if he doesn't start my team, I'll keep an eye on him. I think it was like a 60 or something like that. If you want to fact check me there.
Probably not quite enough, is it?
But yeah, one to at least keep an eye on in the season proper. I think he could have a potential to break out. And I definitely think he's a better player than Will Phillips. So he has a potential to be that third guy in the stoppages and CBAs there. George Wardlaw, he had that pure inside role, started on the bench, tackled like a madman, had more
tackles
than touches.
12 tackles, 10 touches.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's probably a bad thing.
It's like a bit of a Matty Rao kind of situation.
Yeah, it probably levels out, doesn't it? He's not going to have 12 touches again, but he's not going to have 10 disposals. He's going to have more than that. So,
does that hurt or help his chances for your team?
Well, he's gone an 80 there, but again, it's an awkward price bracket to be shopping in the midfield.
Talk about the stoppages, though. He would definitely
he certainly
help
would
with more.
Yeah, but I think if you say, okay, well, he's going to have more stoppages, then most people go, oh, that's good, more tackles, but 12 tackles is already
had 12,
out of the box. So,
yes, okay. All right, I don't think I'm going to be starting him because I like those high price guys a bit better.
You pick the high price guy, and if Wardlaw for whatever reason goes bananas, you drop down
to him. Talking about the Saints, Nazaya Wayne-Miller, I liked what I saw from him. You would expect that after that just shit bloke of a late hit on Jai Simpkins, that Webster's going to be gone for a long time. So I think you've got a halfback going out of the side. There was an interview during the game as well with Sinclair that did not fill us with confidence, the fact that he's going to be there round 1. Is Nazaya... I mean, I know it's only 1 or maybe 2 games, but is that enough to boost him up a little bit for someone who's young and maybe got a bit of upside anyway?
Yeah, maybe a tin's pinch, especially if he was someone you already had in your calculations. It certainly wouldn't hurt. I think Sinclair, what you're referencing is Sinclair mentioning the 5-day break
turnaround
to round 2, and that suggesting that maybe that means he doesn't play round 1. So I wouldn't be, if you weren't going to pick Wanganeen-Miller and then Sinclair's given one sideline interview, you're not going to change. But it might strengthen if you thought you were going to pick him anyway.
Yeah, it might just be that thing to get you over the line. Riley Bonner, any interest? He's the guy that I was maybe thinking about before in terms of homes. He's that 400k player, 463, another one that played off halfback and looks likely to get DPP. I think it's a risky pick in Classic, but
draft
him up in draft.
Definitely went up.
And I don't think, especially with Sinclair gone, he'll probably get hurt when he comes back.
Yeah.
Jack Steele, did you like what you saw from him?
He did exactly what we wanted LDU to do. It was, he had the good role. It was a low stoppage game, but he scored sort of just under 90, I think it was in the end.
So he's the third guy that hasn't left my team, and he won't leave my team. So I feel confident having him there.
Yeah.
Butters and LDU, those other two guys
tackling best as well.
More, I will note that the fade didn't look quite as fresh this week. So make sure you just tidy that up before round 1 there, Jack, because I reckon you score better when it's a nice, fresh, clean fade.
The boys always have it ready to go round 1.
And Rowan Marshall did his best impersonation of Selwood in this game, where he got strapped up a few times, went off a few times with a blood rule, but had a decent game. So he didn't score excellent. What did he actually score in this one? Trying to find.
He still won 100.
Did he?
Yep.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, you must have picked it up late. So, yeah, great game from him.
Only 12 hit-outs too, and he went 100, so...
That's how he does it, mate.
He's a beast.
That's,
He's a
8 marks,
beast.
5 tackles. So he just kind of did his thing. So that is the end. Like we said, we've got so many other things to talk about in the next podcast where we will go through our rookies.
Yep.
Thank you very much, guys, for sticking with us. Lots to still consume between now and the start of round 1. Make sure you give this podcast a big like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell and stay tuned. Make sure if you haven't, go over to our round 1 live show. There is a landing page on our YouTube channel and in the description of this podcast that you can go give that big thumbs up. Let's get to 100 thumbs up, 150 even, so we can have a banger of a show. It will be a big one. Bring your beverage of choice and take work off. Mark it in your calendars. See you guys next time. Bye.